I knew none of the big producers in Istanbul would invest into a LGBTQ plus film. I was always on the side of the meek and the battered. I don't know anything about football, for example. I'm much more comfortable with female characters. Turkey's cultural climate at the moment is suffocating. Forget a film, even a tweet can send you to jail.
Welcome to Pop and Politics, your guide to art and culture in Turkey. I'm your host, Kenan Behzat Sharpe. Each week we host an artist, musician, director, writer, actor, or other creative worker. Today we are lucky to be joined by Ümit Ünal, a screenwriter, director, and author. Born in Izmir in 1965, Ünal wrote his first screenplay in 1986. Titled My Aunt, the film was directed by legendary director Halit Refiğ. My guest today has also written and directed many feature films, including Nine, which was Turkey's official entry for Best Foreign Film at the 2003 Academy Awards, as well as Istanbul Tales, Ara, Shadowless, The Voice, and The Pomegranate. His 2017 film Serial Cook won various awards at the Istanbul Film Festival, as well as in Nepal and Bangladesh. His 2019 film, Love, Spells, and All That, has also won international awards for Best Screenplay, Best Actress, and was honored by LGBTQ plus film festivals in Spain and Canada. As an author, Ünal has also published 4 celebrated books. Since 2020, he has lived in Glasgow, and that is where he is joining us from today. Ümit Bey, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Merhaba. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks so much for being here.
Great.
So let's get started. You have had a long career spanning from the last days of the local Yeşilçam film industry to our contemporary period of independent cinema and streaming platforms. And I know you've told your story many times in Turkish, but I'm wondering if you could tell our viewers how you first began writing screenplays for some of Turkish cinema's biggest names back in the 1980s. And then from there, you went to directing your own films. So in the contemporary moment, the film industry must be really quite different compared to when you began. I'd love to hear a bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was technically, artistically, it was all very different in 80s. I was very lucky because I started working with Masters of Turkish Cinema right after I finished the film school. I came to Istanbul with a screenplay in my bag. And it was, as you said, it was called My Aunt. And my aunt had a long mental illness and died when I was still in school. And I was very much affected by her death. And I turned it into a screenplay without not much knowing about screenwriting, actually. But because I was, inspired by a real event, it happened to be winning some prizes, Milliyet newspapers, screenplay competition and stuff. And I was in luck to meet MüjdeAr in my very first job as an assistant director in Atıf Yılmaz's film Adı Vasfiye. Her name is Vasfiye. And during that work, I managed to convince Müjde to read my script, and she loved it. And she was one of the greatest film stars of those days. And in those days, film stars had a power and vision as well, more importantly. And she led the way for the production of the film. And she introduced me to producers and Halit Refiğ, and my script was made into a film when I was 21. And I suddenly found myself as a screenplay writer in the Turkish film industry. And it was sort of a successful film. I wrote one after the other after that. I had the chance of working with Atıf Yılmaz, Halit Refiğ, and Ertem Eğilmez, and Tunç Başaran, all like very good names, like Şerif Gören in those days. And the films I made as a director after that, I started making films as a director in 2001. they're very different from their films. But as a young man in those days, I learned a lot from them, both about cinema and life. So in 80s, it was only Yeşilçam, the mainstream cinema. It was a small industry with dwindling box office numbers. And the independent film started only like in 90s. And new independent directors found different ways of financing, producing, and distributing films. Meanwhile, commercial cinema also found a way to reach millions, starting like at the end of 90s, I think, with Istanbul Under My Wings and Eşkıya. They were the first, high-grossing films. And it went on for a while like that. But recently, because of the oppressive cultural and political climate and the ongoing economic crisis, the industry is in the dark again. But I've been in this business for nearly 35 years, or for over 35 years, actually. I believe cinema always find a way to survive. So I'm hopeful.
Absolutely. Related to that, I'm really curious about how you see Turkey's place within world cinema now. You've talked about how the industry has changed a lot. Of course, there are some early examples of Turkish films getting recognition. Back in the 60s, there was Dry Summer, for example, by Metin Erksan. Şerif Gören and Yılmaz Güney's Yol winning the Palme d'Or is another really important event in that. And in the 90s, like you said, we have commercial films starting, a lot of people getting recognition, all sorts of important directors. And then today, a lot of films also winning awards, being featured on streaming platforms, a lot of really important directors and a lot of really diverse, interesting films. So I'm curious how you see Turkish films or cinema's position in the world today. Is it getting recognition? How do you situate it?
Compared to our creative potential, I don't know if we're getting enough recognition. Turkish cinema is still a niche of the world cinema, we can say, I think. I don't know if it's the right saying, but we haven't yet produced a film like, say, Parasite, which was a worldwide festival favorite and also a box office hit. Well, box office, of course, means a marketing muscle power, but you need to make good film to be able to put that power behind it. And what is good film? A good film is a magical thing. No one knows its formula. You need really special ingredients to come together. But sometimes all the ingredients are there, but it's not a good film. You need little miracles as well. You need money, good crews, technique, and all that. But most of all, you need freedom. You need to be able to think freely and talk without fear. Turkey's cultural climate at the moment is suffocating. There's a great creative potential. There are so many talented people and thousands of stories waiting to be told. But people are, what's the right word for it? Like scared. And rightly so. The oppression in the air is so thick. Forget a film. Even a tweet can send you to jail in these days. So there's a huge self-censorship problem. Writers and filmmakers cannot think and write freely. They either they turn to commercial films route and they make harmless comedies or, I don't know, heroic historical mumbo jumbo, or they hide what they say behind layers and layers and layers so that it becomes almost invisible. In other words, they shut themselves up before the authority shuts them up. Add to this the pressure of money, the commercial side of the industry, people in distribution and marketing, they're still thinking in the most old-fashioned ways. They don't have the broad vision of creative people. They try to sell the age-old formulas again and again. Their surefire method, for example, is to find a foreign film that worked and produce a Turkish remake.
And that's still happening.
Yeah. We have our own stories, our own talent, but they're silenced by political oppression and big money. We have to fight the self-censorship and find new ways of production and marketing. Only then we can produce films that are open to worldwide audience, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not separate from the political climate and the economics and everything else, definitely.
Yeah.
So returning, if we can, to your films. So one thing I've always found interesting is a lot of your films pay particular attention to the lives of women. So we talked about your first screenplay, My Aunt, which, like you said, was inspired by your aunt. And then the screenplay of My Dreams, Love, and You also focused on women characters, as did your film, The Pomegranate, and even more recently, Serial Cook and Love Spells and all that. So some people have related this tendency in your work to some of the, Yeşilçam masters you worked with earlier in your career, some of whom you shot your screenplays, like Halit Refiğ. So there's this whole genre in Turkish, they call it the women films. They focus on the lives of women, their struggles in society, against social pressures of various kinds. And these kinds of films are also known for frank portrayals of women's desire and sexuality. So I want to ask you, what inspires you to make these films that so often focus on the lives of women? And like, for example, with Serial Cook, which is a really interesting film of yours, there's a kind of implicitly political aspect where, you have a woman character who gets revenge for past wrongs or breaks out of societal molds. So these films seem inspired by a social conscience and awareness and maybe a sympathy for feminist politics. Is that fair to say? What inspires you for making these kinds of films?
I think one umbrella concept can describe most of my work as an objection against the injustice. I didn't choose this concept in the beginning of my career. It happened in years. But when I look back at my old work and my recent work as well, I can see I was always on the side of the meek and the battered against the powerful and the bully. In most of my films, the triggering idea is some sort of injustice in a person's life. And in our country, women are subject to incredible injustices. So women and anyone outside the dominating male culture, let's say LGBTQ plus people, became the characters in my stories. I'm much more home when I think of a female character. I can write their dialogues much better. I cannot sit down and write too macho man talking properly. I don't know their language or their favorite subjects. I don't know anything about football, for example. I'm much more comfortable with female characters. I think that's why it's happening like that.
Definitely. And that's related to something else I wanted to ask, which is about your most recent film that came out, Love Spells and all that. So this one also focuses on women, but more specifically on love between women. And this definitely fits the theme you're talking about of people who are experiencing injustice. Of course, in Turkey right now, LGBTQ people are under a lot of pressure. And this film is really interesting because it focuses on love between two women, but also the way society and social class and all these things have sort of torn them apart from each other. And one day they come across each other once again, and it sort of follows what happens after that. I'm curious about the inspiration for that and also what response you've gotten from the LGBTQ community, both in Turkey and elsewhere. What's been the reception like of that film? Because it really is eye-opening and really bold in a lot of ways.
Thank you. None of my films are directly political. I'm not in politics. I have no connection to any political place. But in deep, my films are also very political, because when you deal with injustice, you have to be political.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about classes, you have to be political. When someone says, I'm in love with you, to a same-sex person, it becomes automatically political in a country like ours.
Mm-hmm.
In most of my works, on the surface, there's a personal story, but in the scope of that micro story, I try to look at a panorama of a country. My aunt, for example, was not only the story of the destruction of a woman by her own family, but also the story of our country in between two coups d'etats,
Mm-hmm.
from 70s to 80, from 71 to 80. Like Nine, Ara, and the Pomegranate are stories of people stuck in one location, but they mirror the whole Turkish society in a way. And Love Spells and all that is also a story that looks at an old love affair in a perspective of class problems.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know exactly where the stories come from, but the story of this film came to me when I was living in Büyükada, an Istanbul island, 40 minutes ferry ride from the mainland. It's a love story between two women, but it is also a story that questions the meaning of love, the meaning of our beliefs. It's a very small budget film because I knew none of the big producer in Istanbul would invest into a LGBTQ plus film. So I designed it according to a no budget style. We didn't have big lights. We didn't have big crews. We didn't have lorries and stuff. You know, Büyükada is famous with wedding photographs. You see lots of crews making like wedding photo shoots, and most of the time their equipment is bigger than ours. You find more lights, and they look more like a professional film crew than we were. We were like a guerrilla film crew, you know, very silent, very quick. We shot it we shot the whole film in 12 days. And I think it shows that it's a small film, but somehow it became my most international film, traveling all over the world, garnering awards from Taiwan to Los Angeles to Canada, and, you know, to all over Europe and everywhere. And I think it's to do with its simplicity and sincerity. The story has also many autobiographical elements. Sincerity comes from that, maybe. And like, there's a scene where the two women play with pine cones, if you remember. We lived that exactly in the island. Some dialogues are directly from my past. So I think that sort of like conveyed to people that kind of sincerity. I'm talking about like real problems in there, and people took it in all over the world. One of the awards I was really happy with, it was audience award in Inside Out Toronto, and I guess for the first time I was awarded an audience award. Normally I get the jury's awards and best, you know, whatever. But for the first time I got this audience award, and that made me really happy. I really love to be with that audience.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a film people really respond to, and I had the same experience with it definitely too.
It was the same in Turkey as well. We couldn't show it in cinemas, partly because of the pandemic, partly, again, the distributors wouldn't be interested because it's a risky film. But it showed in Mubi, And the day it started showing, the Twitter was like flashing with love spells and all that. And that was really happy. And with other films as well, you get lots of like positive, I got lots of positive comments, but this one was really different because people took it almost personally. They write to me in person, like they message me. They write their own stories and who they are and how the film made them so happy. So it's I felt really happy after I made that film.
Absolutely, yeah. So I wanted to ask, you mentioned Büyükada because that's where the film was shot, but you have a second home now. You've been in Glasgow for the last few years. What led you to relocate to Scotland? And I'm curious how your creative life has been there, and also if it's been helpful to get some distance from Turkey, if it looks different from that distance, what you noticed about politics and art here being away. Yeah, what's the experience been like being in Scotland?
I came to Glasgow in search of a new beginning. What new beginning, you might say, at the age of 55. And, and what are you looking for? I don't know. I didn't know. And my arrival here coincided with the start of the pandemic. I arrived here in January, and in the pandemic started, and the lockdown started in mid-March, I think. I don't know what I was looking for here, but I think I was fed up with New Turkey.
The New Turkey, yeah.
The people in power call it New Turkey now. And I'm from Old Turkey. And everything about New Turkey is hurting my heart and brain. And I needed a rest from that. And as a filmmaker, I needed a new opening as well in my professional life. And I thought I would search for it. And very luckily, I was writing a screenplay during the lockdown. I wrote this Mrs. Kara Goes to Glasgow. And this is just a working title at the moment. I was very luckily introduced to a producer, great producer. She is Nikki Parrott from Tiger Lily 2 Productions. And I showed her my screenplay. She liked it. We worked on it together, and we got a development support from Screen Scotland. And this is just the beginning, though, the first step. Now we're looking for further budget and everything. But if everything goes as planned, we'll be making the film in summer of 2023, hopefully, maybe like May, June, let's say. And it'll be my first film in English.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm overly excited. It's the story of a Turkish woman who comes to Glasgow to visit her son. But the son doesn't come to the airport. He goes missing. And she starts searching for him. And the whole film is about that search. It's a psychological drama. There are elements of thrillers, but also with a jet black humor touch. It's a little bit in the vein of my previous film, Serial Cook. And in fact, we've been talking to Demet Evgar to play the leading role.
Oh, that's exciting.
In this film as well, yeah. We've been talking to Mehmet Ali Alabora to play one of the roles. But we'll see. We're still working on it.
That's great to hear. And also, I believe you have another project that's complete or near complete, a film called Oregon, I believe.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask about that. What can we expect? What's that film like?
The director of Oregon is Kerem Ayan. He's a good friend of mine. He's the head of the Istanbul Film Festival, And I also knew him as a director from his theater work and his short films. This is his first film, his first feature film as a director. I wrote the script for him in 2019, but it was a big budget film and there was pandemic as well. So it took him a long time, searching for finance. But finally it's been made with a wonderful cast. I have really high hopes about it. But I haven't seen anything yet, except some stills from the set. So I can't say much more. The story takes place in 1985 in Istanbul, through one day in summer. It's the story of totally different people, young and old, rich and poor. They don't know each other until a silly confrontation forces them all together. It's a black comedy, but again, in the background, there are sociocultural clashes, class struggles, and the seeds of today's huge problems as well. The problems we deal currently didn't occur in one day. They were already there, hatching in the 80s.
Of course. And that's the period where, of course, you began your career. So it'll be interesting to see the 1980s through your eyes like that and what that period was like and how it relates to today.
I'm looking forward to see it soon. I hope he'll send a link and
you can see it, and then eventually we will too.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, thanks so much for being on the program today. It was really wonderful to talk with you about your films and your career and your views.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure.
You wrote the very first article about love spells and all that, and I loved it. And I keep sharing it everywhere because first in English, I meant. It was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for making these films that really affect all of us. So, have a good day, and thank you again.
You too.